chosen one. What brought you here today was not random. I am not the kind of voice that speaks to everyone. I do not broadcast into the general noise hoping someone relevant picks it up. What I carry into this moment is specific, a transmission about something that has been operating in your life for longer than you have been tracking it. Something that the forces working against you have understood about you before you understood it yourself. And what I'm about to show you is not comfortable. It is not a message designed to make you feel temporarily better about a situation that has not changed. It is a revelation about why the situation has already changed, at a level your eyes cannot yet confirm, but that your spirit has been sensing for some time. You made something kneel, not through force, not through spiritual performance or religious discipline, or any quality that can be manufactured by effort. Through something you have been doing every single day without realizing it was the most devastating thing you could possibly do to the darkness that has been working against you. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on every notification. What I am building toward in this message is not something that arrives in the first few minutes. It builds layer by layer. And what it builds toward is the kind of understanding that permanently changes how you interpret everything that has happened to you. If you are already subscribed, I see you. That faithfulness is not something I take lightly. Congratulations for being here specifically for this one. Write 777 in the comments if you have been in a season where you kept going when everything around you said to stop. Because what I am about to show you about that persistence is going to reframe what it actually was. Stay until the very end. The climax of this message does not arrive early. It arrives when everything before it has prepared you to receive it fully. Before I tell you what made something kneel, I need to destroy a lie that has been used against you your entire life. The lie that kneeling requires a conqueror, that submission only happens as the result of force, that the only thing capable of making something powerful yield is something more powerful, that victory is always a matter of superior strength applied with sufficient intensity. This is how the world thinks about power, and it is precisely why the world cannot understand what you have been doing. Because what made something ancient and calculating and specifically focused on your destruction kneel before you was not strength. It was something strength cannot produce. And the moment you understand what that something is, you will stop being surprised by why your life has worked the way it has worked. Even in the seasons that felt the most like defeat, there is a figure in Scripture that every generation reads, and almost no generation fully understands. His name is Job. Not the triumphant version at the end of the story, not the restored Job with his doubled possessions and his new family and his vindicated reputation. The Job in the middle, the Job in the ash heap, the Job who had lost everything that made his life legible to him, his children, his wealth, his health, his standing in the community, and finally his ability to make sense of what was happening to him. That Job. Because here is what most people miss about the book that bears his name. God does not wait until the end of the story to make his assessment of Job's character. He states it at the beginning. Job chapter 1 verse 8. God says to the adversary, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. There is no one on earth like him." God says this before the suffering begins, before the tests, before the ash heap, and the loss and the friends who could not understand, and the silence from heaven that Job found so agonizing. God's assessment of who Job was did not depend on what Job would do under pressure. It was already settled. Now pay attention to what the adversary says in response. Verse 9 and 10. Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. He is not questioning Job's behavior. He is questioning the source of it. He is saying Job is faithful because faithfulness is profitable for him. Remove the reward and watch what the faithfulness actually was. The adversary is not wrong about how most humans work. He has spent enough time observing human behavior to know that most faithfulness is conditional. Most integrity is situation dependent. Most loyalty has a price point where it yields. His calculation was reasonable, and it was completely wrong about Job, because Job's faithfulness was not a response to his circumstances. It was a feature of his essential nature that the circumstances were not capable of modifying. And this specific quality of faithfulness that does not originate in conditions and therefore cannot be extinguished by conditions is what made something that had calculated him as conquerable discover that it had fundamentally miscalculated. Let me take you to a moment in the life of a man most people consider a failure. His name was Jeremiah, and by any external measure, his story does not look like victory. He was called to speak to a generation that did not want to hear what he had to say. He was thrown into cisterns, he was imprisoned, he watched everything he warned about come to pass, not because his warnings worked, but because they were systematically ignored. He wept so consistently and so publicly that he became known for it. The weeping prophet, the prophet of lament, the man whose very name became associated with inconsolable grief. He did not see the results of his faithfulness within his own lifetime. He did not experience the vindication that would have made the cost of what he carried feel proportional to what he paid. And in chapter 20, he says something that should make every reader stop completely. If I say I will not mention him or speak anymore in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot. A fire shut up in my bones. Not a comfortable calling, not a pleasant assignment, a fire that could not be contained even when he tried to contain it. Even when the cost of continuing was so high that he wished he could stop. Even when stopping seemed like the rational, self-preserving thing to do, he could not. And that inability to stop, that specific, costly, irrational persistence in carrying something that brought him suffering he could not explain, and results he could not see, is what made Jeremiah's voice the one that survived 3,000 years and still speaks into the lives of people who have never heard his name. You have a fire shut up in your bones. Maybe you have tried to suppress it. Maybe there have been seasons where you told yourself you were done, you were finished, you were going to find a way to simply live without the weight of what you carry. And then something in you refused, not dramatically, not with spiritual language or theological framing, simply refused, the way Jeremiah refused. And not because continuing was easy, but because stopping was somehow not a real option. That refusal is not stubbornness. That refusal is the fire that the adversary has no answer for, because he knows how to respond to strength. He has been studying strength for millennia, and his counters are sophisticated and precise. But a fire that burns in someone who has every reason to let it go out, who has tried to let it go out, who would in many ways prefer that it go out, and cannot. That fire operates outside his categories. He has no counter for it, and he has spent your entire life trying to find one. Now let me tell you what was happening in the invisible realm during your most difficult seasons, because what you experienced as defeat was being assessed very differently from a different vantage point. Think about the moments when you were most certain that nothing was working, when prayer felt like speaking into a room with no ceiling, when the effort you were putting in seemed to be producing nothing visible, when the people around you either did not notice or did not understand what you were carrying. In those moments, you made a calculation, not consciously, not deliberately, in the quiet way that character makes its choices, beneath the level of deliberate decision. You calculated whether to continue or to stop. You weighed what continuing was costing against what it was producing, and you continued anyway. Now here is what I need you to understand about that moment. That moment was the test. Not the dramatic test that announces itself as a test, not the crisis that makes the stakes visible, the quiet test, the unremarkable, daily, invisible test of whether what you carry is conditional or essential. And you passed, not perfectly, not without struggle or doubt or the ordinary human experience of wanting things to be different than they were, but you passed in the only way that actually counts. By continuing to be what you actually are, even when being what you actually are was producing no visible reward. And every time you passed that quiet test, something was happening that your physical senses could not observe. Something was encountering a person who did not operate according to its calculations. Something had predicted a specific response from you, had invested specific resources in producing a specific outcome, had constructed specific pressure designed to produce a specific kind of yielding, and you did not yield in the way it predicted. And that miscalculation, that discovery that its most sophisticated strategies were producing outcomes it had not anticipated, accumulated over time into something it had never experienced before. Not defeat, not yet. Something more disorienting than defeat. The recognition that it was working against something it did not fully understand. For those who want to go deeper into the spiritual mechanics of what persisting faithfulness produces in the invisible realm, there is exclusive material in the description and pinned comment. Let me tell you about a kind of strength that ancient traditions understood and that our generation has almost completely forgotten. In the wisdom literature of ancient Israel, there is a quality described by the Hebrew word chazak. It appears throughout the text and gets translated in English as strong or be strong or take courage. But chazak does not mean strong in the way we typically use that word. Chazak means to bind, to fasten, to attach with such completeness that separation requires active force to produce. When God tells Joshua to be Shazak in chapter 1, he is not telling Joshua to feel powerful or confident or free of fear. He is telling Joshua to attach himself to the source with such completeness that what happens to the source happens to him, that the separation of Joshua from what he is attached to would require more force than anything in the visible world possesses. You have been Shazak without knowing the word for it, not because you chose it as a strategy, because there is something in you that attaches with a completeness that conditions are not capable of severing, that weathers the seasons that were designed to produce separation and arrives on the other side, still connected, still holding, still carrying what it was carrying when the pressure began. And this quality, this binding that holds under conditions designed to break it, is precisely what Michael in the accounts of Daniel chapter 10 is deployed to protect, not the strong, the Chazak, the ones who are attached with a completeness that cannot be broken by superior force because the attachment does not originate in the natural realm. Michael is not surprised by strength. He has encountered strength in every form it can take across the entire span of human history. What gives him pause is Shazak, the binding that holds when everything says it should have yielded, the attachment that remains when the pressure applied was more than sufficient to sever it. He has seen it before. He has seen it rarely. He is seeing it in you. Now, I want to take you to the climax of everything this transmission has been building, because there is a specific moment in Scripture where what I have been describing becomes visible in a way that requires no interpretation. Revelation chapter 5. John is in the throne room of heaven. He sees a scroll sealed with 7 seals. An angel asks with a loud voice who is worthy to open it, and nothing responds. Nothing in heaven or on earth or under the earth can open what has been sealed. And John weeps. He weeps because the scroll contains the complete unfolding of what God intends to accomplish. And that unfolding cannot begin. It cannot be released. It cannot arrive, because nothing is found worthy to receive it. And then one of the elders says, "Do not weep. The Lion of the tribe of Judah has conquered." John turns to see the lion, and what he sees is a lamb standing, as though it had been slain, not despite having been slain, as though it had been slain, bearing the marks of the cost, carrying the evidence of what it went through, not concealing what the victory required, but presenting it as the credential that made it worthy. The Lamb did not conquer by overpowering what stood against it. It conquered by being willing to go through what no force could make it accept, and accepting it anyway. By being willing to carry what no adversary could force it to put down, and carrying it anyway. By being bound Shazak to a purpose that not even death could sever. And it was this, the attachment that held through everything it cost, that qualified it to open what nothing else could open, to release what could not otherwise be released, to begin what could not otherwise begin. The kneeling that happened before you was not produced by your victory over something. It was produced by your refusal to stop being what you are in the face of everything that tried to make you something else. The adversary has a response to force. He has been countering force since the beginning. He has no response to a lamb that will not stop being a lamb, to someone who will not surrender what they were made to carry, no matter what the cost. To someone who in season after season of difficulty, in test after quiet test, simply continued. He calculates in the currency of force and counterforce. He measures success by yield. He defines victory as the moment when pressure produces the predicted response. And you have refused to produce the predicted response. Not because you are stronger than what came against you, because what came against you did not understand what it was dealing with. It was dealing with someone's Shazak, bound, fastened to something whose source it cannot reach, whose depth it cannot measure, whose continuity it cannot interrupt. And when an adversary who has spent millennia calculating human responses encounters someone whose responses cannot be calculated from the available variables, the only word for what that produces in the one doing the calculating is exactly what the title of this message says. It could not believe it, because it has never seen this. Not in quite this configuration, not in exactly this expression of what it looks like when Shazak operates in a person who had every human reason to yield and didn't. Michael could not believe it either, but for a different reason. He has been watching for this. He knows what it looks like. He has seen it in the ones who shaped the course of human history through persistence that made no sense given their circumstances. And when he sees it in you, in the specific, unspectacular daily expression of it, that your life is contained. What he cannot believe is that you do not know what you are, that after everything you have been through, after everything that was designed to either break you or make you understand your own significance, you are still reading what is written on the wrong side of the mirror, still measuring yourself by what the pressure made you feel instead of what the pressure revealed you to be. What the pressure revealed is that you do not yield when yielding was the only reasonable option. What that means is that you are exactly the kind of person that causes things far older and more calculating than you to encounter something they cannot predict. And things that cannot be predicted cannot be stopped. Here is what I want you to carry out of this transmission. The next time you are in a season of difficulty that seems to produce nothing visible, the next time prayer feels like speaking into silence, the next time the distance between what you are doing and what seems to be happening feels so large that continuing seems irrational, remember what you have been producing in the invisible. Remember that the quiet test, the unremarkable, daily, unsexy test of whether you will continue to be what you actually are, is not a test being observed by no one. Remember that Shazak is not the absence of doubt or fear or the desire for things to be different. It is the binding that holds despite those things, the attachment that remains despite the cost. And remember that what could not believe what you were doing is still watching, not with calculation any longer, with the particular kind of attention that is paid to something that has moved beyond the categories available for understanding it. You are beyond the categories, which means you are beyond the strategies, which means the kneeling that already began has no conclusion other than the one that was always coming for someone who would not stop being what they are. Write in the comments if what you just heard names something you have been living for longer than you have had words for it, for those who want to go deeper, to understand how to walk consciously in the Shazak that you already carry, and to access the frequencies designed to align with exactly this kind of soul. There is material in the description and pinned comment. 3 sacred frequencies, 396 Hertz, 639 Hades, and 963 Hades, with a complete ebook and full audiobook narrated by the Watcher, made for exactly where you are. Share this with someone who has been in the quiet test for a long time and does not yet know what their persistence has been producing. And click on the video appearing on your screen right now. What follows this transmission reveals what happens next for the ones who have already caused what this message describes. Together we are stronger.